Today on our 2019 Ram 1500, you're going to be taking a look at, I'm going to show you how to install the Air Lift LoadLifter 5000 Ultimate Air Helper Springs with Internal Jounce Bumper. This is what our springs look like when they're installed. These are going to be designed for your half-ton, three-quarter-ton, one-ton pickups, your motorhomes, and your commercial vehicles. They're going to be constructed of a two-ply fabric reinforced rubber, so they're going to be really durable. These are going to be hybrid springs. What I mean by that is they're going to have an internal jounce bumper. And what that internal jounce bumper is going to do is, in the event that one of your bags loses air while you're carrying a load, it's going to take up that so you don't bottom out. Another reason for the internal jounce bumper is it's going to make your ride a lot more comfortable. It's going to take up a lot of that road shock when you're hitting potholes or going over bumps. Each bag can be manually adjusted individually for off-centered loads. You're going to have a combined weight capacity of 5,000 pounds. However, you never want to exceed the manufacturer's recommendations on the truck itself. And they're going to mount between your frame rail and your axle. You're going to have an inflation range of 5 psi up to 100 psi, and that's per bag. Each bag is also going to have a top and bottom roll plate. This is going to help protect the bag from damage. All of your brackets, top and bottom, are going to have a black powder coat finish that's going to resist any rust or corrosion. They're going to come with all the necessary hardware, and there's not going to be any drilling required to get these installed. Now that we've gone over some of the features, let me show you how I installed them. First thing we need to do before we start our installation on our bags is we need to measure the height of our vehicle to get a normal ride height. Now keep in mind this is before we add any weight. So we're going to go ahead right up the center of the tire or wheel from the ground to the bottom edge of our wheel well. Here at the back we're about 38.5. Now let's take one to the front. Here in the front we're at about 36.25. Now let's add weight and see what it does to the vehicle. Now we've added about 1,400 pounds to the back of our vehicle. You can see it's sagging quite a bit. Let's go ahead and take another measurement. We are now at 35.25. It's a little over 3 inches of drop. That's putting a lot of unnecessary stress on our axle. Our axles have to make up for what our suspension can't handle. Now let's see what our front did. Here at the front, we're at 36.5, so it really hasn't changed that much. Keep in mind, the more weight we add to the back, the higher the front is going to raise. What is that going to do? That's going to raise our headlights off the roadway, making it unsafe to drive. It's also going to put unnecessary wear and tear on our tires because we're not going to have as much tire making contact with the road. It makes our steering light and it affects our braking. Now with our airbags installed, we've added the same weight we had on before. Now let's take a measurement and see where we're at. Now we've only got about 30 to 35 psi in our bags. And it looks like we're back to normal ride height. So again, 1,800 pounds, 30 to 35 pounds of pressure in our bags. We got back to normal ride height. These bags will go up to 100 psi, so the more weight we add, the more pressure we can add to bring our vehicle back up to level. That's going to take the unnecessary strain off of our rear axle. It's also going to bring our headlights back down to normal. It's going to make our steering better, braking better, and make our tires wear more evenly. To start your installation, go ahead and remove your spare tire and your heat shields. Heat shields are just held up by a couple of 10mm head bolts. Next, what you want to do is you're going to remove your jounce stops. And all you're going to do is you're going to pull on them, just like that. You're going to do that on both sides. The next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to cut this bracket off that held our jounce stop in place. We want to make sure we're not going to cut into the frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut it just like this on both sides, and it'll actually take this cup off, and then we can grind down that weld flat up against the frame. Now on our passenger side, our exhaust runs right over top of our axle here, but it runs pretty close to the section we're going to be cutting off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bolt or this nut and loosen it. I'm going to pull the pipe off, my exhaust off from there back. I'm going to try to do it without having to remove it all the way. We're just going to pull it off of this front section and just let it hang enough that we can cut this off. We'll just have to see as we go. So it looks like I'm not going to get enough movement out of it without taking it off this hanger. So we'll just take a pry bar, take some spray lubricant, soap the water works, and we'll pry this hanger off. We can go ahead and pull this whole section off and set it aside. I'm going to take a cutoff wheel and a grinding wheel. I'm going to start cutting where I have it marked. Again, I want to repeat, make sure you do not cut into the frame. So you can see how I've got this one cut and grinded down. You just want to make sure you do that same thing on the other side of the vehicle. Once you've got both sides done, it's a good idea to go ahead and take some paint and paint that bare metal just to help reduce the risk of any rust or corrosion later on down the road. On our driver's side, inside of the frame rail, right above the bracket we just cut off, you're going to have a bracket that's holding on your brake lines. This bolt right here we need to remove. 13mm socket, we'll go right from the top. Now you're going to take your M8 bolt. It's going to look like this. You're only going to have one of them. In this little small pipe spacer, you're going to put the pipe spacer in between, like that. And we're going to reinstall, or we're going to install this new bolt. Now we're going to go ahead and assemble our driver's side air spring. You're going to take your end cap. You're going to put it over the top. You'll notice one side's going to have 3 holes. The other side's going to have 2. Your end caps are each going to have 3. I'm just going to line up with the holes. And you're going to put on your air fitting. We're going to hand tighten it first. Take a 1/2 inch wrench. And we're going to tighten it 1.5 turns more. So we got 1 and 1/2. We're going to take our bracket that looks like this. Your air fitting that you just installed is going to go through this hole. These 2 holes right here are going to line up with the other two holes on the top of your bag. Lock washer and a flat washer. And one of those for each hole. We're going to go down through and into the bag. We're just going to finger tighten them for now. Then we're going to flip our bag over. We're going to be installing this bracket here. Next, we're going to install our second plate on the other side of the bag, or spring. We're going to set it in place. Take this bracket here. You notice it's got a side that sticks out or a side that has a longer plate on it. This side is going to go towards our air fitting, which is right here. We're going to line up the 2 holes with the 2 holes in the top of the bag. And we're going to have 2 bolts that look like this. They're flathead Allen bolts. We're going to install those. We'll use a 9/32 Allen wrench to tighten them down. And then you want to torque them to the specifications and the instructions. You just want to make sure that you follow the instructions because they do not get torqued very much. You want to make sure that you do not over tighten them. And you're going to repeat that process for the other bag. Now we're going to take our pull wire, carriage bolt. We're going to put one in this hole, or this slot, and one in this slot. Go ahead and thread it onto your carriage bolt. Like that. Put a slight bend in the end of it. That way you can curl it like that into a hole. We're going to feed the head in first. Just like that. We're going to go ahead and leave that attached for now. We're going to do the same thing with the top hole. Like that. And take our bracket. It looks like this. And we put our pull wires through the corresponding holes that basically match your frame rail up there. Like that. Now what we're going to do is you're going to pull off your wire. And make sure you're holding on to the bolt so you don't drop into the frame. And then you're going to put on a flange nut. You're going to make sure that the bolt is seated into that hole all the way. Our driver's side bracket is going to be just a little bit different than our passenger side. Our passenger side is going to have a hole here and a hole here on the edge. Our driver's side is going to have this slot here in the center for a carriage bolt. So we're going to take one and slide it in just like that. You want to make sure that you have space. You may need to jack up your vehicle just a little bit. Separate your axle from your frame rail a little to get these in place. You can collapse your bag enough, but it may be easier if you can get some space in there. And if you look right here, this is where our bolt's coming through our bracket on our axle. Again, this is only going to be on the driver's side. Passenger side is going to have one on both ends. We're going to put on a flange nut. Then we're going to have one that goes in right here. And we'll need an extension to get our nut on to our bolt. Next, we're going to take carriage bolts, and they're going to go through the bracket and up through our bracket here on our frame rail. To make this easier, it is a little bit easier to use like a flathead screwdriver to get my fingers won't fit in the hole very well. Then we'll put on a flange nut. Do that same thing on this end. Then we're going to tighten and then torque all of our hardware to the specifications and the instructions. Now we're going to need to determine where we're going to put our airline tube. Our customer wants it typically right here, right next to the license plate. We're going to put both of them, their air fittings, in that area. We're going to take our airline tube. It's going to come in one piece with two ends. We're going to find the center, and we're going to cut it in half. That gives us our driver and passenger side airlines. Now to run our airline, ran it up through the upper spring mount to the top of the frame rail, right up here. Followed the existing wiring, straight to the back, came over top of my frame rail here, right to here. On my passenger side, I actually went the opposite way. I went out towards the front of the vehicle, attached it to my upper spring mount with a zip tie, went up to the top of my frame, and then went back. When I got back to this cross member, I actually decided to come across to the center and went right over the top of my spare tire mount. That way it stays away from my exhaust. Now we need to drill holes in our bumper for our airline fittings. On the back side, there's a plate that kind of covers this whole thing. If we go too far this way, we're going to be in the back of our license plate holder. Right about here, there's an opening in the back side on that plate. It kind of goes like this. We're going to drill our two holes right there. But I'm going to drill them from the inside out. So you can see this plastic casing here. You can barely see it, but this is the edge of my license plate holder, right about here. So really, this is the only place that we can really do it. We'll take a 5/16 drill bit to drill our holes. I'll put one there. This will give me my driver and passenger side. To install our airline fittings into the holes we just made, we're going to put on a nut star washer first. We're going to insert it in the hole. Then we're going to put on a rubber washer, flat washer, and then a nut. And we're going to do the same thing with the other one. In your kit, you're going to have a heat shield with two hose clamps. You're going to install this on your passenger side. You can see how our exhaust runs right over the top of our bag. You can kind of see how I have it installed. It's protecting my bag from heat from the exhaust. Once you get everything installed, you want to add about 40 to 60 psi of air pressure. And then you're going to take some soapy water and we're going to spray our fittings down to make sure we don't have any air leaks. What we're looking for is we're looking for big bubbles. It looks like we're good there. Once you've determined you don't have any leaks, go ahead and reinstall your heat shield and your spare tire. That'll do it for a look at and installation on the Air Lift LoadLifter 5000 Ultimate Air Helper Springs with Internal Jounce Bumper on our 2019 Ram 1500.